Join us now on Flickr at flickr.com/groups/art of photography.
Hey everybody, my name is Ted Forbes. Welcome back once again to another episode of The Art of Photography. Today we are talking about a photographer named Edward Steichen. And if you're not familiar with Edward Steichen, he was born in Luxembourg in the 1870s and died as a U.S. citizen in about 1973 or so. And he was one of the early pioneers who made some great contributions to photography and to photographers as well. He had kind of a multifaceted career. At one point he was one of the highest paid fashion photographers in the industry. And later in the 50s, he became the director of the photography department at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and made a lot of great strides and efforts in encouraging younger photographers, exposing people who were new to the field at that time. But today what we're going to do is look at this book called Steichen's Legacy, which is a pretty easy book to find. I really recommend that this be in your collection. If you're interested in studying compositional elements and studies and things like that, there's so much that can be learned from Steichen, and we're going to look at some of these examples in a second. But you know, he's really one of my favorites. I think he kind of gets glossed over these days in a lot of ways because he was so progressive so early on in his career. But definitely worth a look. He did a lot of, like this cover, he did a lot of early color works, autochrome process, everything from that to like hand-tinted prints, things like that. So anyway, let's take a look at Steichen's work and see what he's all about. What's interesting is this shot on the cover is an early color photo, and he was a very highly successful photographer among other careers as well. But you know, he did a lot of experimentation with this early color process, which known as autochrome, has kind of this eerie feel to it. But actually the first two images I want to look at are these two landscape images, and I think these are particularly interesting. First of all, they are color, but they're hand toned, and so basically it was a black and white image that was toned. And you know, this one on the left hand side here, this landscape in two colors, this dates back to 1906. It's extremely early. You see some limitations of photography at the time, the blurred focus in here. But what really makes this shot interesting is that it's a monochrome shot in essence, but you have these wonderful ambers and oranges that kind of fill this out. This one on the right is my favorite. This is Pastoral, which dates back to Moonlight, dates back to 1907, which I assume was either shot in the dark or at least shot to look like it was shot at night. But you're going to see a lot of this in these photos that I'm going to show you. Is this low exposure, but this reduction of the composition to just basic elements. You see the sheep in the middle, the sunset, and you have enough definition to understand that's a landscape without having a lot of details. I mean, from a modern technical perspective, this is extremely underexposed. There's a lot of black areas in there, but that's what kind of gives this a sense of drama, a sense of mystery, and makes it such an interesting landscape photo. There's a lot of early color stuff in here. There was this autochrome process. These were actually done in the 50s. They're a little bit later. But, again, this kind of weird sense of color that you see in some of his early work. These are two early just black and white photos. This is a gum platinum print. Both of these are actually. And this one's titled The Mirror. That's on the right-hand side. Let me get rid of the glare here for you. You've got the mirror, and then you've got this woman playing a piano called At the Piano. And these are just absolutely beautiful. This first one's dated approximately 1900, 1903, and the one on the right is 1901. And what's interesting too, and Steichen did a lot of in his commercial work, the classic headshots that you saw back in dating from the 30s onward of celebrities, actors, musicians, that kind of thing. But what's interesting about these from a fine art perspective is, again, this reduction of the composition, like this one on the left, this one with the piano, using light to reduce that to just the minimal amount of information you need to understand what's going on in this photo. You have this woman, you do not see her face, the arm extended onto the piano, and it really gives this kind of intense drama to it. There's a compositional technique that a lot of artists deal with where, if you have a human face in the photo, us as humans, we recognize emotion, we recognize, expression, things like that. When this is taken out, it really creates a sense of drama, a sense of mystery, sometimes discomfort. And you see that a lot in his fine art figure studies, where you don't have the face, the anonymous nature of the whole thing. Especially this one with a mirror. You would expect in a mirror shot to see the face being used as part of that, but it's not. In fact, you kind of wonder what is the emotion here. here? What is this woman feeling? Is it sadness? Is it depression? Is it, and I think that really creates an interesting look. I love this, the paper textures you get with these gum prints as well. We'll talk about alternative process in other episodes. It's kind of beyond our scope here because I want to focus on what his compositional details and interest is. These two shots of children, these two young girls, the one on the right, I assume is his daughter, Mary Steichen. And what I love about these both date the left to 1920 and the right to 1917. And as early as these are, there really is a timeless quality to it. I think, one, he's shooting, children. You tend to, kind of have the age qualities that faces get as people get older out of the subject matter here. But again, kind of harsh lighting at the time. There's some techniques that, you see, especially in the blur quality back here, that these were early lenses being used. But ignore that. It's just the compositional nature of these, the timeless quality to them, which I think is what makes Steichen a lasting photographer in the oeuvre of photography history. Some other stuff. These are a little more dated looking, but again, this complete lack of perfection in terms of lighting. They're underlit or high contrast, but at the same time, this wonderful artistic quality of using light again to reduce the composition. There's not a lot of extraneous details in here in either one of these. Basically, what your eye doesn't need to see, he's not going to present to you. And I think that certainly that's a technique that can hold up to modern composition. Shifting gears quite a bit here, Steichen did a series of these were images that were used in fabric design. So they were highly patternistic, this use of light, complexity, things like that. This one on the left is a series of matches and matchboxes. And again, he didn't just put them on a sheet of paper and shoot them. There's a lot of interest created by this really harsh light that comes in from the top, casting these long shadows. It's a harsh light, but a low light, casting these extreme long shadows onto the matches and the matchboxes. The one on the right-hand side here, these are actually thumbtacks. And again, these date back, and I kind of like to concentrate on these early Steichen photos, just because I think there's, maybe some of his best work was being done. But again, he kind of continued this on. This one on the right, these are spectacles or eyeglasses, but this complete distortion of them through the use of this high contrast, long shadow lighting, almost showing the viewer another world or another way of looking at it by using light to do that. And I think that's extremely important. The one on the left is called the Wandering Thread. It's another fabric design. And these make beautiful fabric designs. Again, extending this technique into more patterns, the use of botanicals and flowers over here, the lack of harsh lighting, but these are more of a minimal approach. And the ones on the right, this is one of my favorites. This one, it's just grass blades, but what a beautiful pattern that makes. But a very interesting concept of means to an end as far as form following function. These are fabric designs, highly patternistic. It's not a portrait. Anyways, we move along. This is another one of my favorite. Probably my favorite Steichen photo period. This is called Windfire. It's Maria Teresa Duncan at the Acropolis from 1921. And what's so awesome about this, and you see this a lot in some of the early photography masters, there is a little bit of a dated quality to this one, but what's interesting is the emulsions being used at that time, being film or glass plates, was a lot slower than what we're used to with modern films, and particularly with what you can do with ISO in the digital realm. So slow shutter speeds, most often to get that exposure. Obviously this woman standing outside, she had to stand perfectly still in this very awkward position while the wind was basically beating her dress, and it really creates a look like it's on fire. I think some of these old emulsions, old lenses, old cameras, when you have motion blur, it's a different quality than what we have with modern techniques with digital photography now. And it has such a beautiful painter type quality to it. I mean, you can see that a lot of, and considering his age and when he was born, a lot of Steichen's work is steeped in a 19th century aesthetic, even though a lot of these were made in the early 20th century. That painterly quality, that classic past master look to things. And I think that's really important to understand with his work, but also bringing it into kind of a modernist world, which he was living in at the time. We talked about a little bit that about this when we did the episode on Karl Blossfeldt and how he kind of had a foot in both centuries. And you see that a little bit, maybe less with Steichen, because I think he was definitely, because he had studied painting, composition. He was an art gallery owner, a curator at Museum of Modern Art in New York. But I think that's where a lot of his training, a lot of his background came from. But anyway, this is such a wonderful book. I really, really cannot recommend this enough. Again, low exposure, Brooklyn Bridge, basically. You've seen a billion shots of the Brooklyn Bridge, but, to have that different spin on it. Last, I want to talk about some of his still life pieces that he did. These are, again, from the 20s. But again, a timeless quality to it. This one on the left here of these two avocados, you have this use of form, contrast between the whole avocado and the haft. This plate in the back with this circular kind of motion that comes into it. The symmetry between the two pieces, but the seed is still sitting in one of them. It creates such a lot of dynamic interest in a study like this. Even this one on the left of this Nautilus type shell that's going on, exploring almost the rule of thirds, when we've talked about that before, and these are just raw studies, but just really cool stuff. Also interesting were some of these that were, that really create a sense of drama here. This one on the right is really cool. This is Diagram of Doom #1 from 1921, taken in France, and this is a grasshopper sitting in a bowl. But again, high contrast lighting, and within that, the reduction of the composition to just the information you need. You have the grasshopper in the middle and playing with the scale with these kind of distorted reflections that happen in the glass naturally. Again, these are more of this Diagram of Doom series. These are moths. Again, with the high contrast lighting, you don't get any detail in the moth, but you've reduced it down to its shape, which is the essential item here. Same with this one on the right, sitting on this block of wood here. But absolutely beautiful stuff. Spider in a web. This one probably speaks a little less, unless this were blown up a lot larger. But again, this sense of humor and playfulness sometimes, kind of having some relationship to the fabric patterns that Steichen was working on. It's a set of eyeglasses with a harsh light on a torn piece of paper, and it really looks the name of the piece is Spectacle Butterfly. So a sense of humor and playing and finding that other world within the shadows is simply sublime. Okay, so that's Edward Steichen. I hope you check this book out. I highly recommend it. It's fairly complete. I've seen it in used bookstores, so it's pretty easy to find, and you can probably get a good price on it, probably even on eBay or something like that. I will put a link in the show notes to the Amazon link. Again, this is a really highly recommended book. And don't forget, if you want to get that link off the show notes, you can go to our website at thepublicbroadcast.com. And also don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter. If you want to follow me, my handle is @TedForbes. Or if you just want to get show updates, you can follow the show Twitter account at AOP_podcast. So once again, this has been The Art of Photography, and thank you for watching.